One out of every 9 XRP available on the open market disappeared yesterday, and everything that is happening right now with the XRP supply is pointing towards something far bigger than anyone expected. ETFs, DATs, and treasury firms are squeezing what is left on OTC desks, and once those sources dry up, the pressure naturally moves toward exchanges. The scale of what just took place is enormous, so this update will catch you up on every detail. There is also new information connected to the DTCC and the concept of sufficient liquidity, something worth exploring because of how it connects to XRP's role in future settlement systems. All of that will be covered, but first, the focus needs to be on what just happened. Yesterday, 6.5 billion XRP vanished from exchanges within a single day, perfectly synchronized across nearly every major centralized exchange. Balances dropped by 50% everywhere at the exact same moment. This kind of event is not retail behavior. It is the largest coordinated XRP removal in the history of the asset, and it signals that something massive is happening behind the scenes. Looking at all the numbers together might feel overwhelming, but what matters is the scale of the movement. Every chart shows the same thing, a synchronized collapse in exchange balances. Upbit showed enormous outflows. Binance saw a decline of 2.56 billion XRP. BitThumb saw a staggering 777 million exit. Uphold, eToro, and Bitbank each saw roughly 50% disappear. XRP is leaving exchanges at a pace that borders on unreal, and from a supply perspective, this is exactly what a tightening market looks like. When XRP is removed from these exchanges and locked into self-custody or institutional storage, the available supply becomes thinner. When the supply gets thinner, the price eventually has only one direction to go. As market participants eat through that supply, the market cap multiplier effect becomes more likely, and this is what many analysts have been predicting, including those championing domino theories and ultra-thin supply models. They see a future where XRP's available supply shrinks to the point where even modest inflows could supercharge the market cap. Nearly every major exchange recorded a 50% balance drop, suggesting that large-scale users, institutional custodians, funds rebalancing cold storage, or major coordinated reshuffle events were involved. It may be a mix of everything. Of course, the ideal scenario would be that all of this XRP is being purchased and moved into cold storage, but realistically, some portion is likely tied to reshuffling between exchanges, OTC partners, and deep liquidity providers. ETF issuers have also become a major factor. When ETF providers need new XRP, they do not purchase it directly on open exchanges. They rely on OTC desks, but those OTC desks are running low, and as the balances drain, ETF issuers are forced to source XRP from other centralized exchanges like Binance, BitThumb, and others that still hold larger reserves. This is why massive outflows can occur without sudden price spikes. These transfers happen in the background, quietly, through private channels designed not to disrupt market pricing. But this kind of hidden balancing act is not sustainable forever. Eventually, when supply becomes too scarce, no amount of quiet back-channel buying can prevent the market from reacting. There were a few bright spots among the declines. Evernorth saw an increase of over 13%. Coin recorded a huge inflow of more than 550 million XRP. OKX showed a strange 10,000% spike, suggesting an address reclassification or the discovery of an internal wallet that was previously misfiled. On the downside, Coinbase has seen a 99% decline since February. Swissborg dropped to almost zero. KuCoin and others saw steep collapses. Overall, exchange XRP balances dropped from 15.86 billion earlier this year to just 6.5 billion now. That is almost a decade's worth of liquidity gone in months. Something significant is happening with market structure and liquidity, and every on-chain indicator tells the same story. On-chain never lies. If the buying and supply removal continue at this pace, the next 12 to 24 months could reshape the market completely. At the current ETF accumulation rate, visible exchange supply would be exhausted within 1 to 2 years, not because XRP itself would vanish, but because the remaining supply is held by long-term holders, whales, institutions, or entities that will only sell at far higher price levels. The market would then shift into a structural liquidity squeeze where prices must rise dramatically in order to draw out new supply. XRP will never literally run out because Ripple's escrow still releases 1 billion XRP per month, but even escrow cannot be accessed casually. Ripple is restricted by court rulings and cannot simply sell directly to US institutional buyers, meaning that American exchanges and OTC desks cannot legally source escrow XRP through Ripple. Only Ripple-owned entities outside the US can do so. This forces most of the market to rely on the shrinking pool of exchange liquidity. Ripple Prime also cannot sell escrow to US desks. This limitation explains why ETFs and institutions must hunt for supply on open exchanges, making every available XRP more valuable over time. Current ETFs already hold roughly 339 million XRP, nearly 0.5% of the circulating supply, and they accomplished this in only a few weeks. Net inflows exceed 640 million XRP, and the total AUM sits near $676 million. Binance reserves are down to 2.7 billion XRP, marking multi-year lows. Analysts are warning that if ETF accumulation continues at 500 million to 1 billion XRP per month, the market will face a liquidity crisis long before exchange supply runs dry. If BlackRock, Fidelity, or Vanguard launch their own XRP products, the timeline could shrink dramatically. And if exchange reserves fall below 1 billion XRP, prices could jump violently because the only remaining sellers would be long-term holders willing to trade only at very high valuations. The asset could become extremely illiquid at low prices, forcing the market to move higher. This is how explosive upward moves to $20, $40, or even $90 can occur, as already seen in past liquidity spikes on certain exchanges. Once the exchange supply becomes thin enough, the only source of additional XRP is long-term holders, whales, and institutional vaults. These entities will not sell cheaply. If someone holds 1 billion XRP and the price reaches $50, that is $50 billion in value, and such holders will not easily part with their supply unless prices climb much higher. Many institutions view XRP as a generational hold, not a quick trade, expecting the value to rise steadily over decades as institutional adoption grows. Retail investors, meanwhile, risk selling too early and missing the long-term exponential upside that utility-driven assets eventually produce. Ripple continues to work with regulatory bodies and financial institutions across the US, the UK, the EU, Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. Their global presence and role in building fintech infrastructure signal that long-term adoption is underway. OTC and institutional desks that continue sourcing XRP will soon face scarcity premiums, driving prices upward. Ripple's escrow releases of 1 billion XRP per month will become a central part of the market conversation, but Ripple is unlikely to flood the market. They understand the importance of maintaining stability. Still, institutional pressure will grow as supply continues shrinking. Analysts have built models based on recent ETF activity. Using an 11-day average, ETFs could accumulate more than 7.6 billion XRP per year, which is already more than the amount available on exchanges. And this estimate does not include future funds or players like BlackRock. Some models show that 1 year from now, without major price increases, the accessible XRP supply could effectively be gone. Supply on exchanges has already dropped 45% in 60 days. Many analysts have referred to the Shane Ellis theory, where a liquidity crunch could trigger sudden vertical price movements. Some charts show inflows, but overall exchange outflows dominate everything. Several researchers estimate that almost 1 billion XRP will enter ETFs within the first 30 days of activity.